Hello everybody and welcome to the Longhouse. I'm Annette Shun, Executive Producer of Contemporary Asian Australian Performance, better known as CARP. Let me begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. And if I may, let me, on behalf of all of us who are on country at the moment, pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations people who may have logged in to be with us tonight. CARP's Longhouse is our networking and information sharing platform. It's aimed at building a resilient and strong Asian Australian performance community. It's been going in Sydney since 2015. Last year, we also held Longhouse events in Melbourne and Perth. And this year, we were going to have events in Adelaide and Brisbane. Of course, that's not possible at the moment, which is why we're gathering here online. And the great thing about that is this is our very first national Longhouse. So for us and for you, it's a bit of an historic moment. Before we get started, let me introduce you to my colleague, Jules Orcullo, and she's going to explain the rules of engagement.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jules. I work in administration with CARP. Just so that you're aware, this session is being recorded and an edited version along with a transcript in English will be available shortly after the event. So if you have any questions about accessing the recording or the transcript or any of these resources, please drop me an email. I'll leave my email for you in the chat. 1 second, here we go. So we recommend that you use gallery view so that you can see each panelist involved in the conversation. That's just a button at the top of your screen, so you can toggle that between speaker view and gallery view. Feel free to use the chat and interact with each other throughout the event. And if you have a question for any of our guest contributors, please throw that in the Q&A box. That's at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer those, as many of those questions as we can throughout the hour. So enjoy. I'm going to throw back to Annette now, if that's all right.
Thank you, Jules. And now I'd like to introduce the person who's going to facilitate the Longhouse tonight, our Longhouse coordinator, Arisa Yura. Arisa is an actor, a writer, director, and taiko drummer. You may have seen her in our work Yasukichi Murakami Through a Distant Lens by Mayu Kanamori. That was way back in 2014. More recently, Arisa premiered her one-woman show, Confessions of a Custard Melon Pan. That was last year. And this year she performed in and co-directed a production called Night Parade of 100 Goblins, which was absolutely fantastic. It was co-presented by Clockfire Theatre Company and the Art Gallery of New South Wales as part of Sydney Festival. So it's over to you, Arisa.
Thanks, Annette. Hi, everyone. I'm Arisa Yura. I'll be your facilitator tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. First of all, I would like to know where everyone is logging in from. It's our first national program, so I would love to know. Could you all please write in the chat which town or state or country you're in the chat box? That would be amazing. I love to take this poll. How exciting. Oh, is it coming along? Oh my God. Okay, so while we wait for, oh my God, I'm so excited. So while we wait for all the polls to come in, I'd like to explain the format of tonight's program. It will be a panel discussion covering 3 major topics. Number 1, the biz. Career opportunity, development of artistic practices and available grants and funding, after which we'll have a Q&A. Number 2, mental well-being, after which we will have a Q&A. And number 3, creative approaches. This is where we'll hear from some of our fellow artists after, guess what, which we will have a Q&A. As the panelists talk, please feel free to send your questions through. We might not be able to answer all of them during each topic's Q&A, but we'll do our best. Our panelists are also, they're kindly giving us their time for this hour from 6 to 7. That's the Australian Eastern Standard Time. And some have to get going at the end of this hour, but because we have a lot to cover, if we run over time, those of you who can and are interested to stay on, we may be able to stay on till about 7:30 if we all feel like we want some time for more open discussions. So, oh yes, so I'm seeing, okay, I want to see where everyone is. Okay, so here we go. I'm seeing Maidstone, Victoria, Woomwurrung and Woomwurrung land. Awesome. Sydney, Melbourne, Old Sydney Town, Sydney, Arisa, hi, Gadigal land, Ballarat, Parkville. Wow, that's amazing. Western Sydney, amazing. Adelaide, hey Adelaide. Oh, this is so exciting. Thank you so much. I love it, still coming in. Cool, thanks so much everyone for that. So yes, thank you so much to many of you who have filled out our online survey, our Longhouse survey, and shared many important issues, concerns, and suggestions with us. It's a tough time right now. We wanted this Longhouse to be an opportunity for us all to share the challenges we are facing together as an Asian Australian arts community. So your responses, your concerns have directly informed the questions posed to our panelists tonight and are going to navigate our way through the discussions. So tonight we have 6 wonderful panelists joining us from all over Australia. First up, we have Rani Pramesti. Rani Pramesti is a program producer at Theatre Network Australia, where she facilitates the inaugural Victorian Independent Producers Initiative, VP. In their independent capacity, Rani is also a co-facilitator of the Creators of Colour project, a storyteller and advocate for cultural equity. Rani is joining us tonight from Victoria. Jamie Lewis is a program manager at Theatre Network Australia, artist, facilitator, and dramaturg. Committed to diversifying practice, Jamie seeks to alternative models of working and a reimagining of leadership, governance, and structures. Jamie is also joining us from Victoria. Next, we have Andrea Lim. Andrea is a community development worker, sound tinkerer, and dim sum enthusiast. She is passionate about discussing the impacts of structural and institutional inequities on social outcomes within and outside the arts industry. Andrea is in New South Wales. Panda Cheong is a registered psychologist who practices within an integrated intersectional framework. Panda cherishes community connectedness and values creativity, critical thinking, and gentle reflection. Panda is also from New South Wales. Katrina Irawati Graham is a writer, director, and an emerging playwright. She writes in many genres, but her true love is feminist horror. Katrina is a co-founder and Queensland board member of Women in Film and Television Australia, a national advocacy body for gender parity and representation of women in the Australian screen industry. Katrina joins us tonight from Queensland. Last up, Joe Paradise Lois. Joe is a founding member of Renegade Productions. He creates, writes, directs, designs, and composes theatre and performance works. He's also a part of the professional and independent theatre industry in Perth as a director, writer, and a sound and lighting designer. Joe is in Western Australia. Welcome, panelists. Thank you. So we're going to start now. I just wanted to remind you all that to send all the questions through as we talk. So here we go. Rani, Jamie, and Andrea. From the survey, 79% of the respondents reported that career development and opportunities were one of their biggest concerns as artists and arts workers. We've seen a lot of grants and funding being offered from various sectors, which is great, but it can get overwhelming for us to navigate our way through them, finding the best support that suits us. Rani and Jamie, would you be able to give us an overview of these available grants and funding and maybe highlight some of them?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm handing it over to Jamie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll kick off just really quickly. I guess there is a lot, and I think I want to say as well that it is also still constantly unfolding, and so the grants are still kind of being announced and changing, or you know, I think it's also a really unprecedented time. So there may be grants that then also everyone, including the people dispensing and or assessing, are navigating this as we all go. So there's a lot unknown. So I think I just want to flag that as well. But I think the two types of grants we're seeing available can be best kind of categorized as survival, specific to survival, and then there's project grants. And so I just want to talk through some of the survival kind of crisis grants. And also to do a shout out to Auspicious Arts Projects in Melbourne, Australia, where a lot of this was actually compiled by them, who they're great colleagues of Theatre Network Australia. So survival grants, the first one I want to spruik is the Theatre Network Australia 1,000 by 1,000 Crisis Cash for Artists. So we've been fundraising. We're trying to raise $1,000 for 1,000 artists in the performing arts. And concurrently, while we're raising the money, we're also request for support is open. So this is very specific for people who fall through the cracks. So if you're not eligible for JobKeeper, or you have a range of risk factors, all of it's on the website, on the form itself. It's very simple. It takes you a couple minutes. As long as you've lost work because of COVID-19 and you hit a few of the eligibility criteria, as $1,000 to be gotten. Specific to musicians, Support Act has also a crisis relief fund available. Goes towards paying bills. So that's on Support Act's page. You'll see in the link there. Some other kind of crisis funds around the Adopt an Artist Fund. The Actors Benevolent Trust, I mean, there's a link there for the Victorian one, but there are chapters across the country. They've got state-based chapters, and each of them operate differently as well. But get onto them. The project grants, I guess we're seeing, if you look at the federal ones, Australia Council, it's got the Resilience Fund, and that's closing in 28th May. And then state-specific ones, and I'm just going to name, I guess, the ones that are, obviously I'm based in Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, and so I'm just going to list some of them, but know that, you look for your state agencies and local kind of government areas. But so Creative Victoria has a Sustaining Creative Workers grant initiative. They're funding individuals and collectives from 5 to 10 grand. Local council grants, obviously City of Melbourne had their round, and I think this again, look for the ones you live and work in. And then there's some organizations starting to dispense project grants, so like Melbourne Fringe. This is all really quick, and time is really short. I think the best place really to look for any updates on all of this is the TNA e-news. So get onto the Theatre Network Australia e-news. If you just look at the back, the April edition, it was a COVID specific one. So a lot of the opportunities are there, and then the May e-news as well. There's been we have been giving it a bit of a COVID focus, so a lot of the opportunities are there as well. And I think that's the best place to get all the updates. And just with my indie hat on, I just want to end on this note that, especially when you're approaching project grants, and this is something I've just observed from my conversations with my peers, there's a lot of kind of grant lingo looking for innovation and new work or things like that. But I guess it's just I just want to share a reminder, I suppose, is that approach these grants with projects that you're already working on. Clearly we're all our projects and processes have been halted in some way. So look for the next bit of the process that you're interested in kind of delving into, and then applying for those grants with that in mind. Like, we're already in a difficult time. Don't feel the need to like come up with something new. Invest in the ideas that you already have invested in, and approach them with that in mind. And that's my I guess I just want to end there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Hello.
Rani?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jamie. Great. So I'm going to talk about professional development opportunities as well as opportunities for community care during this challenging time. So with my first hat on as the program producer of VIPI, so the Victorian Independent Producers Initiative, which I'm delivering at TNA. So VIPI, it's a new initiative delivered in partnership with Creative Victoria. And sorry, Jules, do you mind opening up the website? Awesome, there. So you can find more information about VIPI on the TNA website. And there's 3 streams of VIPI. The first one being the Unlocking Capacity Grant, which is multi-year grant for Victorian-based independent producers. The second stream is the Producers Mentorship Program, which again, it is for Victorian-based independent producers. But the third part of the program is the Salon Series, which is open to anyone and everyone in the independent performing arts community. So I just want to draw your attention to the Salon sessions, especially knowing that this is a national audience tonight. So the Salon Series are basically professional development sessions, also networking opportunities, workshops, conversations of what is the most urgent conversations and skills that we need to be developing as independent producers in performing arts. So initially we were obviously going to do them in person, but since COVID, one of the kind of silver linings is that we have started doing these salon sessions online. So we did one on independent intercultural producing a couple of months ago, which was, showcase independent producers from Australia, but also from Southeast Asia. So just look out for that one. And if you want to be kept in the loop about the salon sessions or any other part of the VP program, hit me up at my TNA email. You can easily find it on the TNA website. And then the second thing that I wanted to talk about with a different hat on, with my indie hat on, as the co-facilitator of the Creatives of Color project. Jules, do you mind bringing up the website? There you go. So creativesofcolor.com was initially a commission by Diversity Arts Australia. And the website showcases interviews with really experienced creatives of color at the moment across Australia and America. And this project came out of my own challenging experiences navigating the predominantly white art sector in Australia. And I got to a point where I was needing support, and I reached out to people who I considered to be my elders or very experienced peers and interviewed them about their survival strategies as creatives of color working in Australia. So if you go to the website, we also have a list of survival strategies. So Jules, if you don't mind just going to the 3 bars at the top. Yep. So you can have a look at some survival strategies that creatives of color have submitted in terms of, navigating a predominantly white art sector and all the things that means. Since then, since we launched the website late last year, thanks to Diversity Arts Australia, we then received another grant from Creative Victoria to conduct some research. So we've actually interviewed about 60 creatives of color. And thank you for those of you who are here who participated in that. And we've identified the top 5 problems and challenges that we experience as creatives of color navigating the colonized white art sector in Australia. And one of the problems that we identified was actually a sense of isolation from other creative people of color. So since January, we moved into a new space at Collingwood Yards, which is a brand new arts precinct here in Melbourne, and started having more public-facing events. And interestingly, again, because of COVID, then we moved all of our events online, and they've been really well attended. And, you know, I'm always just like kind of astonished, but also like really happy to see the people attending, because I don't know most people attending actually. And it's been a mix of providing community care as well as professional development sessions. And these sessions are facilitated by creatives of color and also by allies. And so if you want to know more, feel free to follow us on our Instagram. So our handle is Creatives of Color, at Creatives of Color AU. And also let me know if you want to be added to our e-news. Again, alhamdulillah, we've actually gotten some more funding. And so we'll be continuing our activities at least for the rest of 2020. And the focus will be on nurturing community connections, community care across diverse demographics, generations, and lived experiences. And then we have some plans for connecting creatives of color locally, nationally, and internationally as well. And then we also have a stream of activities that's about prioritizing mental health and well-being. So for example, this month, very beautiful and qualified art therapist, Riham Hakam, will be holding a session on creative exploration and healing. And if there's enough demand for that, we'll keep going, you know, with those sessions. And finally, we've also been doing sessions that are focused on creative practice and opportunities to skill up. So for example, we just did a session on storytelling for stage and screen by Candy Bowers. And again, that was very creative practice specific, but within a supportive environment, only for First Nations and creative people of color. So yeah, all of the Danger Asians here tonight, you're so welcome to come along, and yeah, would love to connect with you. So again, I'll, oh, thanks Jules, you already posted it. So yeah, connect with us, and yeah, would love to continue the convo. Thank you.
Thank you, Rani. It's fantastic. There's a lot of great opportunities. Now, Andrea, as a community development worker, would you be able to share some of your tips for applying for funding and grants?
Yeah, definitely. Jules, if you can bring up the slides. Amazing. All right. Thank you for that, Rani and Jamie. I love the concepts around, you know, community care and healing work within the arts. I think that's really sort of missing in the industry. So I think that's really amazing work. And so important for our communities as well. So before I go on, I want to acknowledge that I'm on Bidjigal land, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I want to pay my respects to any Aboriginal people joining today, and also acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. So I was given 5 minutes to share some grant writing tips. But firstly, I want to acknowledge that grants as a system isn't equitable, right? For multiple reasons that I don't really have time to unpack today. But the very fact that there is a particular way of writing, that, you know, information is primarily English, and that a lot of this information is somewhat based in social capital, really points to that. So I just want to acknowledge that as well. And this is why access to information within communities of color is something that, you know, I'm so passionate about sharing, you know, as someone who was a first generation undergrad and a migrant still kind of navigating these systems. So today I want to give a very quick overview of project development and grants geared mostly to individual artists and small collectives. There's a common misconception, I think, that project development and grants are two very separate things. In actual fact, grant writing is merely a way to communicate your project to a funder. So really a well-planned project would ease the grant writing process, because that's really what the funder wants to know. So in the next slide, I'll explain the foundations of developing a project. Amazing, thank you for that. So if you look at this simple table here, it will help you in developing the foundation of your project. You can plan almost any project with it, and if well thought through, this can be translated to the project description in your grant application very quickly. So rest assured, every grant you apply for will ask for a project description. And your funder needs to have a clear picture in their head about what you are doing immediately. Your project description should always include the why, the how, when, and the what. And I think oftentimes what I see missing is the why. Okay, and this is also known as the need, the problem you are solving, the aim, the goals, or the objectives, depending on how the question is phrased. So the how is often easy because we are idea generators. So if you look at this example, you know, the how is a mentoring initiative for Asian emerging writers. But if you cannot articulate the why you're doing this or the need, you will very quickly run into issues when the funder asks you about the impact of your project for communities. So, so using this simple table, a project description might sound like the mentoring initiative for Asian emerging writers aims to address the misrepresentation of Asian stories through guided mentorship over a 6-month period. 12 mentoring sessions will be delivered fortnightly, covering topics of X, Y, and Z, culminating in a reading at Carriage Works. So that was all information just placed into 43 words, but your funder knows immediately what you're doing using that table. So moving on to the next slide. So now I've pulled the when and what from the previous table and added it to this one, which is a milestones and budget table. So we start to derive our key milestones here. And as you can see, you can now, we can now think about the resources that we need for each stage. So once again, you're still in project development phase here. You haven't written the grant. But if this is done well, all you will need to do is plug or elaborate on this in your grant application. Your funder will always ask for a budget and your key milestones. So it's, you know, using just these two tables, you can form kind of like the skeleton or the foundation and basis of your project that can then be used in your grant applications. So moving on to the next slide, I have some general grant writing tips. So the first one is to plan in advance, and that means also looking at, you know, what the requirements are. And that might be that you might have to find, you know, an auspice, so an organization to auspice funding for you and things like that. And so, you know, if you look at the application 2 days before, you wouldn't have time to do that. My next point is to really read the guidelines and eligibility criteria, because if you don't meet any of that, it just wouldn't go through, it wouldn't get funded. And the next thing is that if you're unsure after reading that, call your funder to clarify your project, but be prepared with your 50-word description so that you can articulate what your project really is doing with your funder. And next point is to find your partners and collaborators prior and get these supporting letters early, so that you know immediately that when you hit that send button, like all of the things that you know needed to gather is in there. Clarity is key. Do not repeat yourself. So if you find yourself repeating yourself through the grant application, you're probably not answering the question. So, which brings me to my next point. Try to answer the question and use the keywords provided to guide your writing and the reader. So if the question is, what is the aim or what is the objective of the project? You can start with the aim of the project is, and that actually really helps you write your answer. You can use dot points. So you can use dot points for readability, and that actually sometimes provides more clarity over paragraph answers. My next point is grant writing is not academic. It's also not creative writing. So things that are very, you know, cut and dry and clear is what your funder really needs. And I have another 2 points to add here. If you have to drastically shift the vision of your project to meet grant criteria, then this is not the grant for you, because you have this vision and you want to get it funded. So if you're finding yourself as you're writing your grant trying to shift it to completely meet this criteria, then maybe wait and find for another opportunity. And also, if you work at intersections, like, if you're working on a youth project, if you're working on, an age and disability project, look for grants that are outside the arts. So you don't have to just look at arts grants. Because you're serving different communities, expand the type of grants that you apply for. And just moving on to the next slide. So I've, just to close off here, I've recently started a mentoring initiative, and this has been like 3 months ago or something, working with Black, Indigenous people and people of color, as well as BIPOC folks identifying as queer, trans, and part of the LGBTQIA community. So if all of that has spoke to you and you're interested in further support, you can go to that link and leave your email address there, and I will contact you when there is any open slots. And that's all from me. I hope that was useful for people in that 5 minutes.
That was amazing. That was brilliant. We've had so many comments, Andrea. I'll spotlight one. Where were you during the first 10 years of me trying to write grants? This is excellent. Love your work and your generosity sharing.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much
Andrea,
for having me.
Thank you. It's really lots of useful tips. And thank you, Rani and Jamie. I would like to open up the discussion to all the panelists now, and we'll be looking at the questions that you guys have sent through, integrating them into discussion. So I'll have a look at any questions that have come through. No questions? Okay.
No question.
Well, maybe
Jennifer in Melbourne has for Andrea.
Okay,
Great.
Andrea.
Is it in the chat?
Yep.
Yes.
I'll just Jen just asked any opportunities for Melbourne mentoring program.
Yeah, so I am not entirely across the Melbourne landscape. So maybe Rani and Jamie can actually help with that.
It's actually part of the plan with Creatives of Color. So yeah, stay tuned. In terms of mentoring involving only people of color, it's part of the plan. And then also for, Jen, you already know this, but yeah, for independent producers who are based in Victoria, the VP program has a mentorship stream, which involves paid mentorships as well. So yeah, that's for independent producers in performing arts who are based in Melbourne. Jamie, do you want to add anything else?
Not in a systematic way, I guess, but I'm always open to chat. It's not like as if my personal success rate with grant applications is exactly very high, but it is not something that intimidates me. So I'm very happy to talk and very happy to share my contact and talk about your project planning and the kinds of grants to approach and how to approach them from a strategic point of view. So putting the offer out there.
Yeah, I think just basically, approaching people and actually talking to them can really help, like my little link there is basically a Google form that someone puts a thing in. It's not any sort of formal process. And then we just meet up on Zoom and have a chat. So, I would encourage folks to just, if there is someone that you want to work with, or there's someone that you're, interested in their work, to just write them an email and just tell them, hey, can I have a conversation with you about things? They might not work with you nitty gritty through your grant, but they would be able to, kind of connect with you. So
another resource that I'll just flag is Australia Council has a guide to mentoring handbook, which is free to download. And it's a great read actually, and it has a lot of guidance and really practical questions to ask yourself in terms of what kind of mentorship model are you after, You know, what are you looking for in a mentee? What are you looking for in a mentor? So yeah, I highly recommend that you look that up as well. Australia Council for the Arts Guide to Mentoring is what it's called.
Just to add as well, like I guess you know, on the not on grants but on mentoring, I've had a couple of different mentors through the years, and everyone's been different, and everyone's been very much you make it up with them based on your timing, availability, expectations, and interests, and also you find different mentors for different things you want to develop in as well. Yeah. So sometimes it's a very artistic stuff. And sometimes it's very leadership, or sometimes it's very practical skills like producing or grants. Then really they're different people. You don't get it from one person as well. And it will change
so
after
true.
2 years. Yeah, mentors. You grow out of your mentors as well. So, you know, yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all the panelists. We do have to get moving just on to the next topic. There are quite a few questions coming through, but we may have some time at the end to be able to answer them. I'm so sorry, I have to move on to the second topic. But thank you so much to Rani, Jamie, and Andrea.
Thank you.
So moving now on to mental well-being. 46% of the surveyed mentioned our mental well-being is our biggest challenge. It's really great to see people being creative and reaching out so much to whatever they can, such as recording video messages for friends and family, creating content to share, starting up weekly chat groups. This is really valuable, but as good as they are, these online substitutes can't always make up for this fundamental changes in our day-to-day lives. Panda, what do you think are the pressing issues during this unique period, and how can we deal with this as a community?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you for your question. I think pressing issues is really hard to narrow down, I think, because the pandemic is impacting on so many people in so many different ways. I think because we're all intersectional beings, so like it's impacting on health, it's impacting on our financial stability and wellness, it's impacting on safety, it's impacting on housing, and of course all those things funnel in together, and that impacts on our mental health or our mental wellness. I think maybe the first thing I want to talk about is as I hear myself think it, it's really funny because I know I'm going to sound like a psychologist. So I'm really sorry in advance for being kind of feely-ish. But I think the first thing I want to talk about is that all the feelings and emotions that are coming up for people are totally normal. So the sadness is normal. The fear is normal. The worry is normal, the anger is normal, the envy is normal, even the disgust is normal. And I think it's really important for us to normalize like these emotions that are happening for us, because the emotions are telling us that something's not okay. Whereas if we try to suppress or try to convince ourselves that we shouldn't be feeling these ways, I think we're doing ourselves a big disservice. So I think maybe like at the very start to just kind of normalize the hardship that everybody's in. And I think maybe like, I don't know if other people have found this, but I've even caught myself kind of not understanding why I'm feeling irritated about something, and then just kind of checking back and reminding myself that like, hey, we're in a pandemic, this kind of fits the facts. Like life isn't really normal. I'll do it in inverted commas. And maybe I think like what is normal in this context is really hard to define. Like going to the supermarket and bulk buying a bunch of toilet paper rolls maybe is considered normal, like within the current context. Maybe outside of that context, I'm thinking about my grandparents. So like my pawpaw would do that behavior and because she was a hoarder, and that wouldn't be considered normal. And so I think like I think we're shifting, and maybe we need to be gentle with ourselves about what is understandable behavior. What else did I want to say? Oh, I wanted to make a note, because it's all Asian Australians tuning in. I know you're all a perfectionist, because I'm a perfectionist too. And so maybe it's about also being gentle with ourselves around our perfectionism as well, especially in terms of like where we're wanting to function. Like I think the way I conceptualize it is that I think about my baseline being lower. So like what I was able to endure prior to the pandemic and now in the pandemic is different. And so that means that what I can achieve or what I can produce or what sort of work I'm able to do is also going to be different. And maybe it's about radically accepting, so not condoning it, not being okay with it, but just accepting that it is what it is, and kind of being aware of where our expectations and our perfectionism sits, and kind of realistic is too harsh of a word, I think, but maybe being more gentle, maybe that's a nicer way to frame it, maybe being more gentle with ourselves about it. And then like with the other part of your question in terms of like how do we deal with this, again, this is such a psychology way of framing it, I'm really sorry, but because we've all heard all the stuff about self-care and connection, so I'm not going to talk about that because I know that we've all heard it before. And I think maybe I want to elaborate on connection in terms of the internet connection, or like connection with people over social media. It doesn't have to just be that, and there doesn't have to be connection all the time. Like check in with yourself around what you're needing in terms of connection. For me, connection with nature is just as useful as connecting with a person over the phone. And sometimes I actually get too drained connecting with people. And so part of it is about like having that part of you that knows what, like I'm not going to tell people how to suck eggs. You know yourselves better than anyone else does. And it's about kind of like leaning into that and trusting that part of yourself. And I think I'm going to make an assumption with everybody who's listening or watching, that as Asian Australian artists, you all would have experienced some level of difficulty. You would have all experienced the unknown, especially as artists, or especially as Asian Australian artists. Like you all would have experienced stress, you all would have experienced pain, you would have experienced hardship. Like this is nothing new. Like what we're experiencing is nothing new. We've done it before. And so the struggle that you're experiencing now, for me, it's about how did you get through the struggles in the past? Like what worked in the past? Who did you use as resources and supports in the past? What strategies helped not revive, but like restore you? And how about like leaning into some of those strategies? I think because I don't want to be the sort of person to sit here and be like, you need to do this and this and that. I think what I'd rather do is say like, you know it, like you all know it. It's just about like, I think trusting yourself and your lived experiences that you've gained knowledge from those. And kind of following on from what like Andrea, Jamie and Rani were saying about the community connection, I think with this, we can only go so far as individuals. We have to work as a community at the same time, and it has to be both. Like if we focus too far on the community or too far on the individual, we're going to get lost at either end. It's about kind of like straddling that seesaw and constantly moving backwards and forwards between the individual and the community to be able to move through this, especially your community, especially like the Asian Australian artist community. And I think already listening to the last three panelists, like there's so much community that's already like been established. So with that, and then individually just keeping yourself well enough. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Pat. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
It made me feel bit better.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Thank you, Panda. You touched on it actually briefly there already, but the other issue in terms of, sorry, I meant hardships. The other issue is racism against Australian Asian heritage. Around half of our survey respondents replied that this was a major concern.
Yeah.
And obviously this doesn't just affect artists.
Yeah.
There has been an open letter addressing concerns over this rising racism sent to Parliament, written by 16 prominent members of our community, including our own CUP's executive producer, Annette and board member, William Young. And as of today, over 55,000 people have signed the supporting petition, and it's growing. So Panda, my question to you is, do you have any advice for those people who are experiencing racism brought on by this pandemic?
Yeah, I think maybe I want to start by saying, maybe by focusing like my answer, that by saying that I'm going to use we as in people who are experiencing the racism, like how do we deal with it? How do we manage it? I think there's something implicitly tricky about that, because what the implicit meaning is it's the individual's job to manage the racism, versus it's the racist behavior that needs to be the focus. And so I want to have that as the overarching frame, because I don't want to give the impression to people that it's your job as the individual to do this work, to deal with racism. The issue isn't you as an individual, the issue is the racist behavior. The other thing I wanted to say is, again, thinking about our communities, like racism towards people of Asian diaspora isn't something new. It's been there since colonization. I think what's happened is, because of the pandemic, it's opened up all the wounds of our country and made everything really visible and raw. And some things are quite infected in that wound. So, classism has been opened up, ableism has been opened up. And I think in this case, the racism has been opened up. And from a counseling perspective, I think I tackle this two ways. So part of it's about validating that the racism exists, that it has always existed. And the other part then is change. And change doesn't invalidate the need to validate. That was a lot of validatings, but that we need both. And I think the change, what's tricky about this conversation is the change, it really needs to be about a change in the racist behavior. But from a counseling perspective, as an individual, we can't change other people's behaviors. So then how do we bring about change if the only thing that we can change is really ourselves? And that's where I get caught in this loop around what's the implicit meaning that's going on behind these strategies. And I think there's a whole lot of stuff that we could do to make, this is so gross as I think about it, but racism more bearable. I think there's something so unpalatable about that, because that's not what it should be about at all. It should just be about destroying racism. And at the same time, it's hard to endure. So we do need to do things to help us endure it. I'm trying to be dialectical about it. I'm trying to hold two things at the same time. I think when we think about it from an individual or a personal level, for me, it's about how do we validate other people's experiences of racism? How do we validate our own experiences of racism? So first of all, saying yes, this is happening, or did that person really say that? Yes, they did. Because for me, racism, there's this power element, right? And so there's this attempt from mostly white Australia to disempower people of Asian diaspora. And so for me, it's about how do we re-empower ourselves then? How do we make it visible? So part of it's about talking to others, telling telling other people, making the narrative not secretive. So it's as a way to disempower the narrative, which is beautiful, I think, in all of your works, like the works that you do in terms of creative works. Like that would be a space to harness this, to disempower it, to turn it into something else. The other thing for me is about using our allies, our white allies, because unfortunately they do hold more power than we do. And it's about how do we have those relationships already set up, and then how do we lean on those relationships and for them to help us within solidarity around this. And I think it's hard because we can't build those relationships while we're in crisis. It's easier to have already built them, and for it to be somewhat reciprocal if there's a way to make it reciprocal. And maybe the last point I want to say is it's about resistance. And resistance doesn't have to be big and loud. Resistance doesn't have to be a protest. Resistance can be silent. Resistance can be quiet. Resistance can be in our mind. I think resistance is also existence. So the fact that we exist within an Australian society, there's a form of resistance in that. And like speaking about narratives, I think part of this is about how do we turn this narrative on its head and look at this in terms of like, we are resisting this, like us talking here is a form of resistance. Like how do we disempower what's going on out there in the world where people are being disgusting and have been disgusting for the longest time, but how do we resist this through our thoughts, through our actions, through even probably just staying safe. So like if you can't act, like if you can't do anything in that moment, you're still resisting. You're resisting by staying safe. And so it's like kind of turning your mind a little bit around the narrative. And I think there's a disempowering of it that way. Reframing, that's the word, reframing.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Yeah, the re-empowering is definitely something that I do think we can all relate to. And for our attendees as well, I think it's a fantastic note. We have one question. I'd like to take one question from Pearl. Panda, any advice for integrating into society when we come out of the pandemic?
Can I ask for clarification? Do you mean reintegrating in terms of health concerns, or do you mean reintegrating in terms of like what we're talking about in terms of racism?
That's a good question. I might maybe
I can answer to both.
Yeah, maybe I could come back to this question just at the end again.
Yeah. I think they're slightly different answers.
Thanks, Panda. It's no, socially feeling okay about re-entering society.
Yeah, I think maybe again, like this is such a psychological way of framing it. I think gentleness, like, and it's like an acceptance that we know it's going to be hard. Like, I don't know how other people have found even just going to a supermarket and being around a lot of people. Like I feel myself kind of shut in on myself, and that's never how I would have been before the pandemic. I think it's about trusting. There's again, the balance thing. Like pushing yourself just enough, but not pushing yourself too far. So like knowing what your limits are, but not over pushing yourself. Because there's still risks. Like that's why the fear is there. The fear is there because there are still risks. So part of us has to listen to the fear, like it's trying to tell us to be wary. And at the same time, we might have to push against the fear gently at the same time. So it'd be taking it slow, starting in maybe like familiar or safer spaces. I don't know if going with someone that you feel safe enough with is helpful or not helpful, like if you're with somebody. But definitely like a slow process rather than a jumping in the deep end, unless jumping in the deep end works for you. So I'm going to keep contradicting myself, I think, because of the dialectic, because I think there is no single answer for anyone. I think it's like on some level, like we have a knowing of what works for us, and it's about listening to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you so much, Panda.
Easy.
So I'll move on. We have some more time at the end for questions and answers. So I would like to bring everybody back on then. So our third topic, we now have Katrina and Joe sharing some of their actions or non-actions they are putting into action. So Katrina. Hi, Katrina. And so this pandemic can at times feel paralyzing. And what are your suggestions for how we can further our career at this time?
I think I'll say first that I'm a creator, but also a mother. I've been a homeschooling mother for 20 years. I'm also an activist and an advocate. So for me, it was already about juggling those three, and entering into COVID for me was definitely I feel like as an activist, it's like we work so hard to try and make things pivot, to make things change. And then suddenly we have the world pivoting without us even doing anything. There's a pivot that's happening. And so I have a lot of kind of desire strongly to make sure that the pivot that happens is going to be something that's going to be meaningful on the other side. Because I don't want business as usual on the other side. I want better business. I want kinder business, more gentle business on the other side, so that we can learn stuff in this space that can be taken out and create change in the way that's going to be more inclusive, more gentle. And so for me, I've been working actually harder within this time frame because of the opportunity that I think that lies within the difficult situation that we're in. So I just want to preface that. And I think that Panda, when you're talking about the community versus individual, I feel like that was like speaking right to me, constantly juggling between taking care of myself and then taking care of my community and the wider community of artists and WIFT community that I've got, female screenwriters and binary. So, but I ran outside just before this started. It's like, oh, I need this quote. And I ran and grabbed it off of beside my work desk. And it says, it's from Aurora Levins Morales, who says, it is part of our task as revolutionary people to be as whole as it is possible for us to be. And I think it speaks exactly to what everyone's been saying. And it's that idea around, yes, we understand personal care and community, and we talk about it a lot, but they talk about it for a reason. It's incredibly important, and I feel like that knitting and what we're doing tonight is really vital for us to not just deal with what's happening now, but as we move forward. And I think, Pearl, your question around once this starts, and I definitely have that thing, like I'm terrified to leave the house because it's really nice and cozy here. I've made it really comfortable. I feel really safe here. But at some point, I guess I'm going to have to leave. And so I think for me, it's knowing that when I leave, I'm leaving for purpose and I'm leaving not alone, that there's other people I can talk to. So one of the things that we've done with Women in Film and Television is that we had a mentorship program called Mentor Her that was already in place. It was already happening. But when COVID happened, we just realized that we had hoped to match 100 people, but we just went into overdrive. We need to give as much good news as we can. And so we went nuts and actually have matched 200 mentees across Australia, and with something like 92 mentors, Australia-wide and internationally. And there was still a handful that we couldn't match, that we really worked really hard to try, but we couldn't. And the thing that was interesting in that is that there was more women of color within that space of unmatched. And that was because we had written a question to everybody, and this speaks to safety. And one of the questions that we asked was, would you like to be matched with somebody who shares your similar, self-explained demographic? And so there were women of color who said, we want to be matched with women of color. And I think I totally get that, because there is research around, as much as allyship is an important, although problematic, I think, concept, there is also the great safety of being mentored, and that's why I love what you're doing, Rani, and Jamie and everybody with and Andrea, with offering this mentorship to by people of color to other people of color, and I think that's an incredibly important concept. So we were definitely matching up women of color with women of color. We matched all of the people who were First Nations mentees with First Nations mentors. So there was I think a lot of work within that to sit. So we want even more women of color mentors so that we can match those other mentees, So I think that's one thing, is really understanding that level of safety and trying to expand that level of safety within the mentorship program. And then the other thing that we did was we also had asked our members, like, what's happening for you? And people were just so befuddled, like, we don't know what to do. And so we, really worked hard and delivered 6 wellness sessions that was just for free, just get together and talk and feel safe. And so I think that thing of safety was just so essential in the early days. And we also have within WIFTA a Women of Color subcommittee that we haven't really had a chance, because I only started at the end of last year, to do anything. And now I'm realizing, just talking now, how important it is to start something that's going to be really small, that we can have just women of color who are with members, just to get together and just talk to each other just around that safety. So I think that's the thing that I'm feeling very proud of the work that we're doing there, and really want to continue. And I also work in anti-racism as well, and so that's something that I think is really important to just keep working in that space, in the anti-racism space. And I co-facilitate a group called Unpacking White Privilege, and so I think that, and I'm about to start another group as well. So I think, like, I guess what I'm saying is this idea of being as whole as possible, it is to be as revolutionary people, which we all are. Like, all of us as Asian Australian creatives in this world are incredibly, in powerful positions to tell stories, our stories. And so I think for us to be as whole as possible, both individually as well as a community, and supporting each other, is incredibly important at this time. So that's where I'm kind of really focusing all my energy, and spending a lot of time resting. And I have the things like, lower your standards and keep going. It's like, just lower your standards and keep going. And if today I can only give 10%, I'm going to give 100% of that 10. And the rest of the time I'm going to be lying in a hammock and reading a book. So yeah, that's, I guess, where I'm coming from, and what the work that we're trying to do.
That's amazing. Well, do you have time for anything else? It sounds like you got full hands.
I have full hands, but I do. I think what I found is that I'm spending more time. I've got a lot of like rituals, like grounding rituals and breathing rituals, and aromatherapy and listening to music. And I have a lot of very specific things that I do that I know work for me and help to keep me sort of safe and present and grounded. And so I do a lot of them. And what I found is that I'm doing more of that in order to do the things that I need to do. So I'm having to do a little bit less and more of the self-care in order to do that little bit less. And so, but I'd rather go slow and bring all of myself with me as I go, than to go really quick and have to go back and pick bits up because I dropped them along the way, So yeah, so I'm going slower for sure. And I think that's something we can definitely use as we pivot out of this space.
That's so true. Thanks so much, Katrina. To Joe. Hey, Joe, you're representing the Western Australia Carp crew. Woo!
Yep.
And you've curated the Longhouse program last year in Perth. And I heard that it was, the room was packed out.
It was a slightly smaller room, but it was packed out nonetheless.
So, Joe, I want to ask you, so currently, as you know, we are not allowed to gather at venues and theatres. A lot of things are going online. I feel a lot of pressure to digitize. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, okay, so this is like weird, right? Because we've just had like X number of like amazing people be like, here is all the rad stuff to do. And I'm so in awe of all of that. And I think it is incredibly possible that what I'm about to say maybe has no value. But regardless, I think when it started, I was really struck, when all of this started, I was really struck by how active everyone was towards taking what we, and when I say we, I mean performance makers in specific, which is what I am. There was this rush almost to adapt and move towards this, discovering this kind of new way of presenting or doing all this online stuff, all of which I thought was incredible, right? So I'm never going to be like, this is not something you should be doing. But I will say that I think it's really worth taking this time to re-examine the reasons why we become performance makers in the first place, and especially as makers of live work. I think that speaking for myself and speaking for a lot of people around me, we have chosen to engage in live performance not because we actually want to be filmmakers or actually want to be YouTubers or anything like that. We've chosen live performance because we inherently believe in the power of gathering people in real time and in real space. And I think that is a really precious and powerful thing. And we've devoted time and energy towards developing skills in that area. And I guess my contribution to this conversation is that it's almost like I just want to reiterate both to everyone and honestly to myself that it's okay to, in this time, kind of go, hey, this is not the time for my art form. And while I can definitely upskill and reskill, the pressure to immediately switch to new forms of like new art forms realistically and be amazing at it all of a sudden, I think is on one hand like potentially dangerous, and on another hand like, you know, almost impossible. People that make art for a digital audience have spent the time that we have spent making art for live audiences, perfecting their craft. And while I definitely believe in upskilling, I also believe that it is really worth us going, you know, this is something like revisiting the fundamental principles really of what we want to be doing with our creative selves, and saving ourselves for the moment where we can gather again and reconstruct the things that we want to be doing. And I think personally that flows over to a lot of the stuff that we're hearing tonight is so wonderful, and for me to acknowledge that there was a part of me in hearing all these amazing things everyone is doing to get like really stressed out about all the bullshit nothing that I'm doing. And again, maybe this is for myself as much as everyone else, but I spent a lot of this time going, I'm so glad that there are so many people doing so many wonderful things, but I also need to be okay with going, what I need to do is wait and think and kind of like be around so that when the time comes that the things that I love and I'm interested in become relevant again, because they will, that I'm there and ready for that.
Thanks, Joe. I really hear you coming from the theatre, being in the theatre as well. Thank you so much, Joe. I've noticed that a lot of questions and answers or the questions been answered by the panelists in the chat room. So it's really, that's awesome. So maybe just because I'm very aware of the time that we're at, I might keep going just sort of to wrap up the night. And so I want to thank Katrina and Joe. And we'll take more questions for Katrina, Joe, and other panelists just a little bit later on just after we sort of unofficially soft wrap up. Thank you both. And so before the Q&A, I want to do a quick shout out to our Northern Territory artists, Haneen and James. Haneen and James, are you here? Hello. Hey, Haneen. Hi, Haneen. Yeah, I just said Haneen twice. I'm sorry. Haneen and James.
Hello.
Hey, you're in Darwin, right?
We are.
Yay! Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Could you share with us some of your up and coming programs happening over there? Sounds really exciting.
You can go first, Annette.
So James and I both work for the same company. We work for a couple record labels here in Darwin, one being Skinny Fish Music and the other being Settle Down Records, of which James is an artist and I occasionally DJ. We are really excited to go into a project over the next 4 years where we embrace Darwin as the gateway to Asia, and we can honestly engage people in honest collaborations, particularly Asian Australians and other Asians, and hopefully allow for other Australians to gain a genuine understanding of Asian cultures as well, which is really important to both James and myself.
Yep, it's been pretty amazing. In the last couple of years, we've sort of built this connection with Taiwan by taking a band from the Tiwi Islands of amazing Indigenous musicians who they're not actually playing anymore, but we took them over to Taiwan and felt this incredible connection with the Indigenous people over in Taiwan and started these kind of back and forth trips. And through that, it sort of led to a big vision that we started thinking about how we are closer to Singapore and closer to East Timor and Indonesia than we are to Sydney. And really feeling that it just feels like Asia here. I'm sure many of you have been here over the years, and there's just something incredible about that. And you can watch Taste of the Territory on SBS at 8:30 p.m. tonight and you'll really know what we mean.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Darwin's got my heart. I can see Jamie saying, yes, I actually met Jamie on a plane flight when she had been in Darwin and cooking.
That's great. It's all connected. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm sorry it got a bit later than we wanted to, but really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that was Hadeem Martin and James Mangohik from Northern Territory. Now, we have one more. Courtney, are you here, Courtney?
I'm here. Hello.
Hey. So, Court, what have you been up to? Can you share with us some of the skills you are offering to the community?
Thanks so much. I mean, it's such a great panel. I just resonate so much with what everyone was saying, you know, kind of that push and pull between feeling like you still want to have some kind of creative output, but also that being very, very difficult given circumstances that we're all kind of operating within and the different pressures that our daily lives now have on us because of the way that we have to live at the moment. So I think the most meaningful things that I have been doing over the last 2 to 3 months, other than obviously caring for my 2-year-old Bobby, is for the community, I put out a post on Facebook, I think it was like in the beginning of March, where I said that I would read the first 3 scripts that hit my inbox and provide a full free dramaturgical assessment of that script, whether that be a play or you know, a TV series or a film script, and I would then follow that up with a phone call and a phone chat to talk through some of the points and, you know, look at further areas of development if those people who sent me their scripts wanted that. And I really this is kind of something that I've been thinking about for a while, because I felt like, you know, and, you know, when COVID hit, I really felt like now was the right time to you know, get it going, because I really feel like there were so many really great opportunities that were starting for a lot of people, particularly within our community, but also the wider Cal community. And now that we're seeing theatre companies really go into crisis, my fear was that a lot of those opportunities would disappear. You know, we saw what happened with Playwriting Australia, and we're unsure as to what that is going to look like in the future. So while we're kind of waiting for people to kind of get back on their feet, I was like, I've really taken it upon myself to make sure that our community isn't left behind, that we're still, you know, that we can still find areas and opportunities to have rigorous development for our work, so that it is excellent, that we can kind of keep striving to, you know, keep developing our stories, so that, you know, this place that we're starting to claim on main stages in Australia can continue in the future once people get back on their feet, or whatever the future iteration of theatre is going to look like. You know, and I do have to say that, you know, yes, I put my hand up to do this, but my work is 100% inspired by everyone in the community, and it's mutually beneficial, because it absolutely keeps my dramaturgical skills really keen and sharp. In this time, I can whip out an assessment in like under 2 hours. That's like, I never was able to do that before this time. So I'm super thankful for everyone being so generous and sending me their scripts. Yeah.
Thanks, cool. It's really amazing what you are giving to the community. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's great to hear you.
Thanks so much.
Great, thank you so much. I would now like to open up the floor for the general Q&A, but because it is 7:17, it's way over the time, I would like to bring back on all the panelists and want to thank all of them with their faces on. Hello. Hi, thank you so much. Thank you, Rani. Thank you, Jamie, Andrea, Panda, Katrina, and Joe. Thank you so much for your time. I'd like to give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. We're happy to stay on answering more questions. Some of our panelists can stay, but some do have to get going. I think Jamie, oh no, Jamie, yes. Maybe Jamie has to get going soon, but if you got any questions, please keep sending them through. But one,
I did want to respond to a couple of things.
Oh yes.
And bye, Jamie, if you gotta go. Just listening to a few people, I think, you know, in terms of like, it's so incredible that so many of us are doing this kind of like multi-layered like advocacy as well as creative work, right? And at the same time, you know, I really appreciate what Joe was saying, especially during this time. And I feel like maybe it's a nice reminder that like, we don't have to be everything to everyone all the time. And that's true anyway. But especially in a time of crisis like this, we don't have to be everything to everyone all the time. I think it's really, really important and urgent to remember that. And I've been doing a few like reflective kind of exercises, and I thought I'd point, you know, the group and the community to it in case it's useful. I think it was Deepa Iyer put out a series of questions about mapping your social change roles. I can put it in the chat, but yeah, it's I found that really helpful because it was kind of for people who really want to engage in social justice movements in whatever way, but then kind of like acknowledging that everyone has different roles, you know, and like with creatives of color, for example, it's some of the activities is very much about caregiving actually. And then other people are the kind of like the disruptors, you know. And also shout out to Democracy in Color, whose fellowship I'm in at the moment, because they refreshed the social change theory by Bill Moyer. I'll put that in the chat again. Again, really helpful to kind of figure out, like, in terms of your contribution and the contribution you want to make, like what are the roles, or what is one role that you want to engage in? And it might be actually as the storyteller, as Panda said, you know, and maybe that's how you can contribute. Yeah, and I'll also shout out to Joe, because I think what you said really resonated, and the over focus on productivity, I think, is another, like, Panda, I think you mentioned about like infection and like things that are festering, and I think overemphasis on productivity, you know, we got to make room for rest and reflection. Yeah, just wanted to add that.
I want to thank you for that too, Rani, because I think it does go back to that same thing. It's like around, if we want to be revolutionary and we want to be creators, it's about being as whole as possible. And that does sometimes mean we have to go slower so that all of ourselves are with us, and all of our friends are able to come with us, and are the people that we're sharing our spaces with as well. So yeah, I think that's really important too. Thank you.
So very quickly, I also have an exercise to add with, I think, Panda talking about building your communities prior to a crisis. There is this pod mapping exercise by the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective. And, you know, you can kind of, I'll put the link in there as well to try and think about who the people that are around, like who's around you that can support you in times that's difficult, or in times that are, you know, when you're in crisis, which is, you know, two different situations as well. So I'll put a link in there for that as well.
Thanks, Andrea.
Yep, no worries.
I have questions from the community that I'd like to highlight. So this one's from Anne Dang. Any advice for young doc actors out there? Sorry, no, POC actors. POC, pure people of color actors out there. Anyone would like to respond to that question?
I think all the advice tonight applies to everybody, really.
Yeah, I was trying to think who could be, like, whatever could versus. And
that is a very open-ended question, and I think welcome to Andang, to the Longhouse community. I think perhaps if we have other opportunities to have other Longhouses, you could log in for more opportunities to ask questions, but also keep an eye on what we are doing. And our Facebook page also is a great resource for things that are going on that might send you off in the right directions to find the support and advice you need to get your career started.
And can I say, I'm gonna jump in, like, I think like as Annette was saying, like, I think the advice does work for any creative. But if you're, you know, a young POC coming out, then I think that it's really important to surround yourself with other POC wherever possible. Like Ella used to get your crew together, get your friends together, and just make sure that you have other people to talk to who have been there before, who are in there at the same time as you, so that you can nourish yourselves and regenerate when you need to with other people who understand what you're going through. If you look for you know, support from psychology or counseling or whatever, look for, where you can, people who have an understanding about that as well. Which is why it's so great to talk to someone like Panda. But there are people out there, so do understand that you do have a, you know, as POC, we do have a different experience to white people, and that is not to be underestimated. Daily racism is not to be underestimated. So do nourish yourself and surround yourself with as many people as you can who will understand what you're talking about.
Great point. And I think there's one more question there in the Q&A. Can you do that one, Arisa?
Yeah, sure. It's anonymous. When communities are always forced to put on a united front, in contrast to white systems, and you believe deeply in lateral solidarities, how do you make time and space for debate when you perhaps don't agree with something someone says from within the community without publicly appearing as if you don't want a united front? So, that's a good question. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, hi. I really like this question because I think about this a lot. And I tend to just like virulently disagree with a lot of people about a lot of stuff. And I kind of like think that the contradiction in terms of holding a unified front and having healthy disagreement and debate within that front is not a bug, but a feature, actually. And that we need to question the inequities of our own backgrounds and cultures and systems at the same time as us questioning the ones that we find ourselves in, and an understanding of history of all our various cultures, and an ability to look honestly at cultures. All cultures have, in their own way, built-in inequities. And I think when we look at those things and we can have conversations and debate about all of that, it actually strengthens the idea that we are not just not white, and that what we are unified with isn't a blank wall of sameness, but we are unified in thinking that we live in a world with systemic inequalities, and that we are all trying to address and combat these inequalities, internally as well as externally, and that it's all part of this really great kind of questioning and quest that is artistic expression. And I've spoken about that up until now in terms of these big kind of giant philosophical political things, but also in tiny things like, I don't know, is Pokemon better than Digimon? Like, pretty great to have those kinds of conversations. Anyway, that's me. I'll end my monologue.
Yes, that was a clap. Anyone else?
Can I respond to that, actually? I think I just want to share that, again, when we did the interviews with creatives of color late last year, one of the problems that we identified was also less people spoke about this. It was like 7 out of 60, something like that. But the impact was severe enough that we included it in the top 5 problems. And this problem is actually the harm that people of color do to each other. So whether that's men of color, instigating sexism against women of color, whether it's non-disabled people of color pushing out disabled people of color out of POC-only spaces, classism, and so on and so forth. So I really love this question because I think it talks to that. It talks the nuances of that. And the first thing that came to mind in response is different spaces for different conversations at different times. I feel like, is one approach.
Yeah, I think what we're all about really is about diversity and about embracing it. So that, of course, means a diversity of opinion. And I think you have to stay true to what you believe and what you think, but you also need to just stay open to other people's opinions as well. And I think that as long as you do so with respect and openness, like, who knows who has the right answer to these things? I mean, there's different shades of right and wrong. So yeah, I think about embracing that diversity in the true sense of the word would be fantastic. Except for one thing, I think time is against us. So I'm really sorry to say that we need to wrap it up. We have extended beyond our time, but we'd love to hear from you about what you thought about this session. Our survey is open until June, if you'd like to fill that out. We're also going to send out a little questionnaire so you can tell us what you got out of this Longhouse, and if you'd like to do it again, if you'd like to see more Longhouses online, and perhaps the sort of things you would like to discuss. And I would really like to thank, firstly, Arisa for doing a fantastic job facilitating tonight. Really great. Thank you also to Jules, who for driving this so brilliantly. She's in the background just making it all happen. And to our wonderful, wonderful panelists and speakers tonight, thank you so much for so much wisdom that it's just been totally amazing. And of course, thank you everybody. I hope you get an idea of what the Longhouse is about. It's about bringing us together and feeling a sense of community. And I hope that we've managed to deliver a little bit of that tonight. In the meantime, please stay healthy, stay creative, stay true to yourselves, and stay in touch.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone.